The Wasteland is a 1922 long poem by the American, later naturalized British poet Thomas Stearns Eliot. Eliot was born into an upper-middle-class family in Missouri in 1888. Disabled by a double hernia as a child, he was unable to participate in physical games and turned to reading as a compensation. He began writing poetry at the age of 14, although he later dismissed his early efforts. He gained a degree in comparative literature from Harvard in 1909 and an MA the following year. He studied philosophy at the Sorbonne, then Hinduism at Harvard, before coming to Oxford, where he met his wife-to-be, Vivian Haigh Wood. They married in 1915. The union was an unsettled one. Both endured health problems, and Vivian was frequently mentally ill. He drank excessively, and she used opium, partly on prescription. During at least part of the time when The Wasteland was being written, Eliot was suffering from a nervous breakdown. Much later, in 1938, Vivian was committed to an asylum, where she died in 1947. The Wasteland was several years in the making and was originally twice as long. Eliot had established his poetic credentials in 1917 with a collection called Prufrock and Other Observations, and he'd earned an invaluable mentor in the person of an expatriate American called Ezra Pound. Pound took an editorial axe to Eliot's first draft, as well as providing many useful comments for revision. Later, he claimed not unjustifiably to be its midwife. It's worth pointing out that Vivian also made helpful suggestions. The Wasteland consists of 5 parts. Probably the most important thing to understand about it is its title. It's an allusion to the medieval story of the Fisher King, one of a series of tales linked to the Holy Grail, and which probably predates Christian versions of that story. The Fisher King was wounded in the thigh, probably a euphemism for his genitals, and somehow his lands have become barren as a result. He awaits a noble hero whose role is to ask him a unique, healing question. In the version of the story that I think is most relevant to the poem, Sir Percival visits the king. The king's hopes are understandably raised, but Sir Percival has been warned against too much talk. So to err on the side of caution, he doesn't talk at all. In short, redemption stands ready and waiting at the door, but for reasons which must evade the Fisher King, it fails to materialize. His barren lands are condemned to remain a wasteland. What we have throughout Eliot's poem, then, is a low-intensity atmosphere of impending decision/doom, both imminent, as, for example, in Part 2, a game of chess, where 2 women chat in a pub and a disembodied, hurry up, please, it's time, continually breaks in, and transcendent, as, for example, in Part 5, What the Thunder Said, which obliquely references the biblical story of Moses in the wilderness. External literary references are drafted in at virtually every stage to bolster the overall impression of existential pessimism and fracture, both high and low, Greek mythology to popular song and everything in between. And there's a reciprocal nihilistic effect in which the sources of those references are subtly called into question. In the final stanza, we arguably see into the mind of the Fisher King, who is apparently both omniscient and insane, his brief address being both learned and incoherent. The overall effect is, of course, culminative. What we have in The Wasteland is a series of disjointed, vaguely disturbing vignettes, mostly devoid of the context required to make full sense of them. No sooner do we begin to think we've got a handle on one, then we're brutally plonked into another with a different focus and tone. We can never quite get our bearings, and the different types of rhyme and non-rhyme and enjambment add to the overall sense of dislocation. In most versions of the poem today, it comes with 7 pages of the author's own footnotes. It might help the prospective reader to know that unless you're writing a university essay or an academic paper, they're not required reading. Eliot only produced them because he wanted to issue the poem in book form, and his publisher required a few more pages. Some of the notes are more cryptic than the poem itself, and Eliot later cautiously regretted them. The Wasteland is a poem everyone should read at least once, apart from the fact that it's widely regarded as one of the 20th century's greatest literary works. It's about the world we still live in today. In some ways, even more so than when it first appeared.